This is it. The final week of Overwatch League regular season qualifiers is upon us. Can you believe the playoffs are just around the corner? This year has gone by incredibly fast, and the cool part about this regular season finale is how major it is. There are still multiple playoff spots up for grabs here. So many teams are taking a part in this race too. By my estimation, over half of the league is fighting for the sake of seeding in some way, shape, or form. And don't forget that the Countdown Cup tournament could also play a role in this. The knockouts on Sunday could have a major implication on who gets a guaranteed playoff spot or at least gets some sort of fighting chance. That means a lot of games this week are crucial. You do not want to miss out. Before getting into my predictions and weekly preview, here's some quick thoughts on last week's big matchups that I highlighted. First up is the Fusion and alexyOWL. And surprise, surprise, a Philly game went the way I expected it to for once. After what the Fusion showed me in Week 16, I had confidence in this group to bounce back, and they did so with authority as they pretty much had control throughout the entire set. Alarm and Funny Astro's positioning was superb, Carpe was doing Carpe things, and Hoppa had himself a major game against his former team. You could tell how much this victory meant to him. It was a very emotional moment. Key match number 2 was between the Defiant and Justice. I told you guys I was really scared for the Justice in this game, and they proved me right. The only issue is, they played way worse than I thought. I still expected them to win this game after all, but they didn't even come close. The struggles continue with this group. They look so defeated out there. They don't exhibit any sort of confidence. They play so scared. There's no sense of urgency in their play, and if they aren't playing scared, they're likely making some sort of other huge mistake. This team continues to be a major disappointment. The way they're performing right now makes me think they won't be doing much damage at all come playoff time. On the other side of it, it's a pretty big win for Toronto. They are now just one win away from clinching a spot automatically in the playoff knockouts. Let's see if they can get it done. Seoul versus Philly would be the next key match, and all I have to say about this one is the Fusion still have the same problem apparently. They are so incredibly momentum-based. They have no resilience at all. If one little thing goes wrong, they fall apart. Seoul took advantage of this fact. Their stronger mental allowed for them to gain an edge. Philly realistically could have won this. In fact, they came dangerously close. But close doesn't count for much, as a lot of Philly fans have come to learn throughout the years. Finally, we had the Atlanta Reign versus the Dallas Fuel, which is another match that went kind of how I expected it to for some reason. Atlanta are still fighting for the playoffs, and Dallas are starting to practice less, so now seemed like a good time for the Reign to get that ever so elusive win against their rivals. Dallas didn't make it easy on them, but a W is a W. Pelican was on point in this series. At the halfway mark of the year, I favored Shy over him for Rookie of the Year, but those thoughts are now long gone. This man is the clear-cut frontrunner, and it's really not close. End of story. With my overall thoughts on key matches now out of the way, let's get into the Week 18 predictions. As per tradition, the final week of qualifiers starts on a Thursday, where we start things off with the Paris Eternal and Toronto Defiant. These are two relatively even teams looking to lock in their spot in the playoffs, so I consider this a key match. Right now, the Defiant hold a 1-point lead over the Eternal. If the Eternal lose, that could mean serious danger as Florida inch closer and closer to knocking them out of the picture and taking their spot. There's a lot on the line for these two potential playoff dark horses, and I just so happen to have a decent amount of confidence in both sides. Paris for their potential and non-stop improvement, and Toronto for their strength in this meta. This could be a real bloodbath. The two squads have reason to feel confident in themselves. Toronto are a better Sombra team, but Paris are better on Pharah and Ball respectively. If I'm being honest, every positional matchup is very close. In my opinion, it's the tank lines that will be the deciding factor this game. Michelle and Sato seem pretty on top of things currently, and I definitely do favor them as a duo over Dawn and Vistola. It's going to be on the Paris tanks to step up, as we've seen them do time after time. If they can play up to their competition, I have no doubts in my mind that Paris could win. They've defied the odds many times already this year, so why not again? It's a toss-up, but I think I'm going 3-2 Paris. My reasoning behind this decision is Paris are more proven. The Defiant looked good last week, but generally speaking, most of their wins this year have not been super noteworthy. It's difficult for me to credit them for beating the Justice when they are in just such a terrible state right now, and that's arguably one of their most impressive wins this year. Paris have beaten better teams. When push comes to shove, the more proven teams usually win this kind of matchup, which is why I feel comfortable going with the Eternal. Anyway, on to match number 2. The Houston Outlaws play the Florida Mayhem in key match number 2 of the week. This one is critical. The Mayhem are still attempting to make a playoff push, while the Outlaws are looking to lock up a top 3 seed in a guaranteed playoff appearance. The Mayhem need every win they can get, seeing as they're on the outside looking in, so it kinda goes without saying that they'll be playing with a lot of desperation. And I mean, after what they showed us last week, a win here is more than possible. They felt like their old selves during Week 17 as they showed a competitive nature behind the heroics of Yaki and the resurgence of OG. The meta right now seems to suit those guys. The only issue is, the meta has evolved to a point that is also going to favor the Outlaws compared to when they played in Week 16. More Hanzo and Orisa in the mix could be a scary thing to deal with on top of everything else they're good at if you're Florida. The happy Hanzo is no joke. It's only going to give the Outlaws more carry potential. If the Mayhem are going to win, they need another big performance out of Yaki. It's the only way. After what I saw last week, the Mayhem clearly live and die by him right now. He's got to be the superior player over his DPS counterparts. If I'm being honest with you, I think I might favor Florida. It's very close, but right now they're kind of on a roll. Again, it's that desperation factor. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Some of my lost faith in this franchise has recently been restored. If we're being honest, they absolutely showed better consistency than the Outlaws in their first week of games. Houston beat a bad Justice team and then got crushed by Atlanta. That same Atlanta team that Florida almost beat, mind you. With how determined Yaki and the boys look, I don't want to go against them in this kind of matchup. In the past, Houston have always seemed to lose to this type of team that's on a really big roll. So let's go 3-2 Florida as Yaki puts on yet another legendary performance that overshadows the big plays made by Dante and Happy. I'm going off gut feelings here. I have no clue what to expect. I just have a good feeling about the Mayhem right now. They're playing with such confidence. They seem hungry. That spark is back, and they need to catch up on some wins they should have gotten the last few months. Instead of being a doubter, how about I go towards the underdog believer path for once? Let's go Mayhem. Heading into APAC, another key match presents itself between the Spark and Hunters, and again, big playoff implications on the line here, folks. The Spark are just barely holding on to a playoff knockout spot currently. A bad week out of them could open things up for the alexyOWL to steal their spot. On the other side of it, a good week out of Chengdu could propel them over the Dynasty for that number 2 seed depending on how the tournament goes next week. Luckily for the Hunters, they have the opportunity to be in control of their own destiny. If they win both games this week, then either do better than Seoul in the tournament or at least make sure they don't go far in the tournament. The 2 seed is all theirs. There's lots on the line. But who wins? Well, I for one favor the Hunters. No disrespect to the Spark, they're very decent, it's just that Chengdu are in their element currently. Leaf gets to show off his insane flexibility, Jinmu has access to the Pharah, Chengdu can play ball without a lot of punishment, and they can play Mercy as they please. There's so much good going for a team whose confidence is through the roof. The Spark can try as they might to counter them, but it seems like a bit too much to handle in their current state. They can't seem to regain that former Junjiao's glory, and no amount of effort has been able to change that. They appear to be stuck in a state of mediocrity. The Hunters are at a higher level, hence why I am picking them to win this series in 4. The Hunters aren't just more consistent, but also more trustworthy overall. Is it really up for debate at this point in the season? Unless the Spark suddenly play the best Overwatch we've seen out of them since June, you should expect them to fall flat. Wrapping up Friday morning is a game with way less significance. The LA Valiant use what little time they have left versus the Guangzhou Charge. Neither team can make the playoffs at this point, so it's really just for pride. The Valiant feel a little more confident than before, but it's nothing that makes you believe they are truly favored or anything like that. They're still the underdogs, because while they have made individual maps a bit less lopsided in recent memory, the Charge have been taking these kinds of maps. They put on a decent show against both Shanghai and Chengdu last week. As I thought, Guangzhou have potential in this meta. Most of their team feels rather comfortable out there. Kariv and the DPS in particular seem to have found a groove. Against a team they're better than, the Charge could put on a really exciting show for us. As the clear-cut favored team, I am expecting them to win. This will be the Valiant's best chance to win a game, but I just do not see it happening. They don't have it in them, I feel like. Improvements or not, they are still the worst team by far. I am picking the Charge to win 3-1. I'm giving the Valiant a map just because desperation is a very powerful ally, but it's nothing that warrants panic if you're a Charge fan. They should have firm control. Their tanks and Kariv will be the big difference maker. We all know Eileen and Choi Se-Wan are going to pop off. So when you combine that with big potential outings out of Krong and Kariv, it feels like a convincing Charge dub. Carrying on, we have the Battle of EU Part 2. Not much has changed since the previous meeting. London are still desperate for a win, and Paris are looking to make a playoff push. It's the same situation, but in a different week. The only thing that's really different at this point would be the meta, and I guess London's increased desperation. Believe it or not, but I actually think the meta gaining more variation will only help the Eternal get an even bigger advantage. Showing off a clean ball and Orisa comp throughout the year gives me even more optimism that they will play well. Naga really getting to show off on various heroes is another reason to feel confident in this group. On the other hand, the Spitfire did show a decent fight last week. Blase on the 76 alongside Shax on the Tracer seems like a nice combo. Honestly, if Shax plays the way he did last week, London have a shot. Do I think they'll pull it off though? No, I don't. I have the Eternal winning 3-1. I simply favor Paris in a meta that's super wide open like this. And again, it's difficult to pick the winless team when they're playing a legit opponent like the Paris Eternal. It's very much possible, but I'm not optimistic enough to go through with the upset. I fully believe that the script writing gods up above want to maximize the drama. They want London's winless season to come down to the meme game we've been looking forward to for months. More on that later. For now though, we head on over to the Shock and Titans matchup. Now normally, I'd have nothing to say here, but since Vancouver did 3-0 Boston and they got the breadstick meme accomplished finally, I'm forced to reconsider. The Titans low-key did not look half bad. Even in their loss to the Justice, they at least took a few points on Anubis and Route 66. They appear to be comfortable out there in this current meta. Changsik and Dalton's synergy seems to be on point when they whip out the Wrecking Ball Tracer. The plays they're setting up are being capitalized on more often, but they're not the only ones. Heck, even Linkser and Terror are joining in on the fun. It's the happiest and most confident I've seen this group all year. There's a lot of heroes they're getting good value out of. However, they still are the underdogs. The Shock may not be what they once were, but they're still a relatively solid team that are clearly better on paper. Plus, I kind of think Boston threw multiple times in that loss to Vancouver. They stubbornly played the same thing instead of opting into the mirror. The Shock won't make that same mistake. A Krusty-led team is not going to be stuck in their ways. Not gonna happen. The Shock take it 3-0. If a struggling Justice team can sweep the Titans, then surely the Shock could as well. I'm hoping the Titans do make this a game, but I'm not holding my breath. I'm not putting too much stock into this. Ending Friday afternoon, the Florida Mayhem played the LA Gladiators in a do-or-die situation. This has key match written all over it. It's a big one. Can the new and improved Mayhem win this game and potentially make the playoffs, or are the Gladiators going to shut them down as they attempt to fill out their own agenda? This is going to be good. Both teams took Atlanta to a map 5 and are 1-1 so far this stage. Sounds like a pretty even match on paper if you ask me. Yaki has been the talk of the town as of late, but it's important to remember how dangerous Bird Ring could be in this meta too. With Hanzo getting relied on more, Bird Ring is right in his wheelhouse. The DPS carry potential in this game is absurd. It's so absurd that both sides could cancel each other out, because I know the DPS on both sides are going to pop off no matter what. That's not even a question. In my opinion, it's more about the supporting cast. Who's going to enable their DPS more? Who's going to make a more heroic place of their own? That will be crucial in deciding this contest. Who gets more value out of the main tank position, for example? In my eyes, it's probably Muse by a slight margin just because he's a bit more versatile. But honestly, the real thing that gets me favoring the Glads here is probably their support line. While I love and respect the Florida supports, you cannot deny what the LA supports have done as of late. That rotation of theirs is dangerous. Shu's been on fire all year. Skewed is a top brig in the league. Moth is one of the most valuable main supports we've ever seen. It's perfectly balanced, but super dangerous at the same time. Overall, the Glads have had the better season in terms of supports, so I prefer them when it comes to who is more reliable and capable of making the right decisions. It is this edge at support that makes me think the Gladiators will take the set 3-2. For the sake of keeping the storyline going, I really do hope the Mayhem win. I'd like to see them fulfill that comeback, but for some reason, I don't have a great feeling about this one. I kind of feel like this is where their luck may run out, and as they lose a closely contested match, their playoff hopes are now resting on the shoulders of making the Countdown Cup. Buckle up, Florida fans, because this is gonna be wild. Heading back into the East one final time, you've got the Valiant versus the Hunters. This is it, Valiant. Your final chance to avoid going winless comes down to this. Not gonna lie, this is a pretty sucky final opportunity if they don't beat the Charge on Friday. Chengdu are the last people you want to run into right now. Getting that 4-0 stage and a chance to overtake Seoul through the tournament is something they won't pass up on, especially in a gimme scenario like this. With how good Chengdu look right now combined with the importance of this game, it goes without saying that I'm predicting a Chengdu sweep. The Valiant are out of their league here. This team was starting to show improvement, but they needed more time. Time that they didn't have. Sorry Valiant, but it's 0-16 time. The final qualifier of the East this year will be the Charge versus the Spark. Again, This week is important. The Spark need to win. If they don't, that really opens up a chance for the NYXL to seriously push them out of the playoff picture. What really sucks if you're the Spark is all the pressure is on you in this situation. The Charge aren't playing for much. Losing this game means nothing to them, but pretty much everything to you at the same time. This is a dangerous trap game. Hangzhou aren't unbeatable in this meta. It honestly plays more up to the Charge's strengths, if anything. Not having to worry that much about long-ranged hit scans helps a lot. It gives them a way to win without having to straight up outduel Shy. I low-key think the Charge might sneak up on some people. If the DPS can keep doing their thing, and if like Kariv or Rio or maybe Karong can have a nice match, anything is possible. However, just because the Charge can theoretically use some workarounds to their advantage does not mean victory is assured, nor does it mean they'll have an answer to Shy. The guy proved to me he can be good at Sombra too, not to mention that McCree and Hanzo are things he could also get good use out of, and if we're being honest, most of us definitely prefer the Spark at tank and support. People like MCD and Goushway have been way more consistent this year. The trap game potential is certainly present, but I believe in the Spark to finish this year on the right foot as they go on to win 3-2. Deep down, I have this feeling the Charge are going to make this a series. They showed me last week they are capable, so I'm holding them to a slightly higher standard here in this final week. But ultimately, because I do see the Spark as the better team, I have them winning the series. Now for the game that memers across the world have been waiting for. The Bread Bowl 2.0, let's call it. London's final chance to win a game this year if they fail against Paris. What a spectacular opportunity to avoid going winless, and it comes in such dramatic fashion. It's the fated meeting we've been waiting months for. Can they overcome the confident Vancouver Titans? I personally kind of like their chances. Despite their dominant win last week, the Titans are still a very beatable team, even for the Spitfire. This might be close though. With the Titans playing better, it might take everything London has to get this win. Shax and Blase have to show up big time. What we saw during last week with Dallas and Toronto has to show up here. I really don't know who is going to win this game. Your guess is as good as mine. But for the sake of having the London storyline finish in the most epic fashion possible, I'm going to predict a London victory in 5 maps. It's mostly a gut feeling, but I do see Shax coming to play. These veterans do not want to be involved in such a pathetic part of history, which is why I think they'll play some top-notch Overwatch when it matters the most. They'll find a way to shut down the Pharaoh with double hit scan. I really don't think Terror's going to be a factor on that character for some reason, and their superior synergy is going to open up just as many plays to make, if not more, than Changsik and Dalton. This is London's final stand. Here is where they win. They're hungry for it, and they played better here in the second half of the season. Now is the best opportunity they'll ever get, and I reluctantly do believe in them to pull this off. As we head out of memer territory, the Gladiators and Outlaws play each other in my final key match of the week, before the knockouts begin that is. What a game this might end up being. The two sides are very close to one another in the playoff race. A poor week from Houston could allow for the Gladiators to jump ahead of them in the standings. Much like in the Florida game for each team, it could be a real bloodbath at DPS. I'm looking at Dante versus Kevster in the Tracer duel. Dante can't let what Pelican did to him happen once again. The Outlaws need Dante. He's the most important playmaker on the team in most people's eyes. And if I'm being honest, Kevster might be able to take him. That's what's scary here. If Pelican can beat him this badly, Kevster could surely keep up with him at the very least. The Glads are looking pretty good here, I feel like. They definitely were a better team during week 16. And yet again, I'm looking at the support line advantage of the Glads. I love Jake to death, but I'd be lying to you if I said I liked his chances against Skewed in a Brigitte mirror match. Crimso I have a bit more confidence in to keep up, but that just might not be enough. The Houston tank line as well as Dante popping off are critical here. They will be the difference makers if the Outlaws want to win. If the Outlaws can get those positions going on early, they seriously might end up being the victors. However, the Glads simply feel stronger to me as they have less win conditions to meet. The Gladiators win at 3-2 as they overtake the Outlaws in the standings. I don't know, man. After how badly Houston got beat by Atlanta, my confidence is starting to waver a bit in them. There's a good chance they will shake it off, but whether it's enough to beat the Glads is very much up in the air. The Gladiators are the safer choice, hence why I picked them. And finally, the last regular season match of Season 4 will take place between the San Francisco Shock and the Toronto Defiant. Despite an up-and-down season, the Shock very well could clinch a top 3 spot in the West with a good performance this week. Their opportunities this week offer a great chance to achieve this goal, too. Toronto are very beatable. It's not going to be easy, however, that's the thing. I'm not quite sure if the Shock will have an answer for Jesus Sombra and Michelle's insane diva play. But you know, if those are the only things they have to be seriously concerned with, I like their chances. The Shock are going to be pretty comfortable out there, I feel like. This is a great meta for Nero, who specializes in many of the most relevant DPS heroes. And do I even have to remind you of Twilight and Violet? Lastro, yeah, he's a very solid support, but this might be a bit too much to handle. His Ana and Zen are both fantastic, but when you're matched up against one of the best in the league on both of those characters, that's a tough hill to climb. It's kind of just a big struggle for Toronto. They did well last week, but they weren't perfect. I very much favor the Shock in a 3-1 victory here. Most of their prep will likely be going into this one, which is bad news if you're the Defiant. San Fran are a team you definitely should not underestimate in this current meta, and I believe this Defiant team will learn that the hard way. And that does it for the games we know are going to happen. But we're far from done. With this being the final week of qualifiers, that means we have knockouts to look forward to on Sunday. As usual, I'll keep it brief and to the point by showing you who I have making the knockouts in each region, as well as who advances to the tournament next week. Starting with the West, I'm going with the Reign, Gladiators, Shock, Eternal, Defiant, and Mayhem. Many of these teams are still trying to confirm playoff seeding, so the results from this side of the league will be very interesting to say the least. Also, Dallas don't make the cut for the first time as their map differential will just miss the mark. Over in the East, there's not much predicting I can really do because both Seoul and Philly are already a lock-in, but I also see Chengdu and the alexyOWL joining them since I don't believe the Spark win both of their games this week. And just like their rivals, Shanghai also miss out for the first time since their map differential keeps them out by default. As for who advances to the Countdown Cup next week, I'm going with the Dynasty, Hunters, Gladiators, and Reign. I picked the Glads and Reign because I think they are the best teams in their respective region. Then I picked Chengdu because their strength is really good in this meta, and then finally I went with Seoul over Philly because I have learned not to trust the Fusion in the clutch. With how momentum-based that team is, that loss from last week might put the nail in the coffin. Plus, Seoul look pretty good right now. This is where they break the curse. And those are my brief thoughts on the knockouts being held this Sunday. Predictions for those games will be posted on Twitter in the community tab once we know for a fact who faces who. There's so much riding on this tournament and final week of play. The hype is unbelievably real, and I'm ready for some good Overwatch. And with that, the video comes to a close. This was the final week of regular season previews and predictions here in Season 4, so I just wanted to thank you all for your continued support. So many of you always tell me how much you enjoy and look forward to these videos every single week, and that really does touch my heart. Doing this series every week requires a lot of time and work, but you guys make it all worth it. Thank you so much for your overwhelming support. Anyway, that's gonna do it. Until next time, guys, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.